Okay, we are going to discuss chapters 50, I always do this wrong, 51 through the end of the book. And as I was talking about this with Grace yesterday, I said that my usual approach of proceeding chapter by chapter and discussing the events in chronological order does not at all feel appropriate for this final discussion, because that would involve pretending that there was not just a murder and an execution. So I think we should start by openly acknowledging all that's happened and allowing for just general responses to the end. I know for some of you, at least, this is the first time reading it, and I'm just very curious. I'm going to try to elicit more interaction from the start than usually happens, and just ask you to give me your reactions to the ending. Anybody willing to start that off? Doesn't have to have been your first time, but I guess I'll ask some more specific questions to try to prompt thinking about it. Were you shocked by it plot-wise? Were you, Chad's nodding his head. Okay. Did you regard it as coming out of the blue or consistent with things that had happened before? Coming out of the blue, I mean, it comes out of the blue. That's I think unarguable in a sense, but also did it seem like it contradicted what came before, or did it feel fitting to you? Okay, so we have Tarsha.
In a sense, it didn't fit with Tess being so meek and not standing up for herself throughout the novel. Mm-hmm. And I knew that it was going to mean her demise in the end, but I still had this like sense of being glad for her, even though it was a horrific thing. I was like, she's going to get some time with Angel. She's going to fight back against all of the wrong that was done to her. And as horrific as it felt, I was almost a little bit glad that she did it. Mm-hmm. So it was, yeah, shocking, but you know, well, there's mixed feelings, right?
I guess one of the big questions in my mind as I was thinking over these final chapters is, it felt, okay, so plot-wise to me, it felt shocking in a way that was absolutely thrilling to me. When I still feel the moment of sitting in that room, when I read it again, I felt as if I had been previously sitting in the room with that woman while she knits. It's just quiet and nothing is happening. And then she looks up at the ceiling and sees the spot, which in my book, Grace says this was again omitted from her book, is described as it spreads as the ceiling looking like an ace of hearts.
Yes, yeah, my book had that too.
Okay.
That's this is like the version before the version that everybody else has. And I found a note that describes why it's missing all of those things, basically just because it wasn't the final version. So I'm not really sure why they decided to publish this one. They're like, it's just for academic comparison purposes. Okay. I'm like, okay, but like, could you not get the other one? Like, is that why?
Yeah. Okay.
But anyway.
It's good to know that exists. For warnings in future. Okay, so it felt plot-wise absolutely shocking to me in a way, honestly, that thrilled me. I mean, I consider that
the perfect way to describe what I was trying to say.
Okay.
You gave me words.
Yes, but then at the same time, I didn't feel. I think this is what you're saying too. I didn't feel any kind of. I didn't feel like it was out of the blue in the sense of incomprehensible, like this radical turn that I could make no sense of. So I was asking, and also, I mean, I feel like he was successful in making you withhold judgment from her in that moment. I mean, something truly horrific and grisly just happened. but I didn't feel like
He
you.
was so successful at making us hate Alec
Yeah.
that it felt like an act of justice.
Yeah. I think that's true because, and I was reflecting on why that is. And, Shoshana mentioned him as the Jaws shark, appearing constantly. And his appearances escalate. So we had him as the devil in the last set of chapters. And here we have him rise off of a tombstone and terrify her. So he takes on an almost demon-like, ghost-like character. So I don't know, he's so detestable that it is impossible to feel sympathy for him in that moment. Shoshana.
Okay, I was just going to comment that this is one of several key moments in the book in which, even though the book is very long and tells us many things about the process Tess is going through, we aren't there when important things happen. Okay, so we aren't actually there for the killing. We aren't there when she decides to join him. That's we see the prelude to it, but we don't have that moment she says, okay, I'm doing this. And similarly, we weren't there when the rape happened way back when. And so that's an interesting thing for Hardy to do. Just that it's all about Tess, and yet what you might think of as I don't know if you're making a play, that's the scène à faire. These are the scenes that we have to see, and he doesn't give them to us, even though we have in agonizing detail we're trying to figure out before she marries Angel if she's going to tell Angel what the story is, and she thinks about it. There's a lot more about her deciding to tell him and delaying that, and then finally she does, etc. Then about these things, and we were actually there. Well, we weren't quite there when she told him.
Yeah,
we don't have the words.
Right.
We're told that it happens. We don't have the words. So it's I don't know exactly why he does that, but I think it's important to notice that he does it.
One thing I read suggested that one possibility, which I find interesting, is that he needed to do that in order to preserve this image of innocence and perfection. This image of perfection in her, that if we saw that in detail, that would be it'd be hard to feel that way. I think I was questioning why he doesn't put her Angel's dispute with religion into her mouth. Why? So it seemed like that makes sense to me. I don't know if that's why, but it does make sense to me that having those things happen off the scene enable us to just view her as this innocent.
I like that description better than what was on the tip of my tongue, which is it's more dramatic that way. When you let your imagination populate the scene, it can be a lot more powerful that way than if someone explicitly tells you.
And we miss
like when someone is afraid of the dark. It's not that you're afraid of the dark. It's like what you can't see in the dark that your imagination puts there.
And we miss the execution too.
Right.
Right. So it's a long book, but he removes things from it. I was actually just going to comment on the question of there being different editions. That's always an issue with a writer, especially when it's been done over time. And I guess to think of it comically, do you remember that scene in Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest, when Gwendolyn and Cecily are comparing their diaries to decide whom Ernest proposed to first?
Yeah.
And one of them says, my dear boy, clearly chose me first, so I am engaged to him. The other one says, well, since Ernest proposed to you, he has clearly, first one says, I've got the prior claim. The other one says, since he proposed to you, he has clearly changed his mind. Right. And then, and which of course is ridiculous, because that's not how you decide whom someone is engaged to, by looking at a diary. And there's no Ernest anyway. But there is actually some truth to that about, this is the way the writer wanted it first, and this is the writer's final word. So, which I think is what we have here. So I actually think what they call having a variorum edition, where you see what the different versions were, that's kind of interesting, especially.
Oh yeah, it certainly is. I just wish that I had her putting her face on her mother's neck in the beginning, which I didn't have in my version last
You would have
week.
preferred to have them side by side at least.
Yeah, which I kind of did once I picked up on the differences. I started comparing mine to the version that's on the Gutenberg website, which is the one that you all have.
Mhm.
So it actually has been interesting for comparison. I shouldn't be so denigrating about it.
Stefan.
Okay, so I just want to say, first of all, I didn't realize how much reading I had to get in.
Okay.
Because I always put it off to Sunday mornings. I get up super early, and I'm on the East Coast, so I have plenty of time. So I was like, well, I need to buy the audiobook because I normally walk a track. So I was listening to the audiobook to finish it, and it was weird to hear it in a British accent because I didn't think of the characters in that way. Anyways, so, but I was probably making comments out loud to people. If they heard me on the chat, they're probably like, what the hell? But because I was like, wow, like what? And so I just wanted to say, it felt like the story sped up so fast, and this isn't a criticism, but we came to a head, and then it just poured out in this amazing ending. And that scene where she saw the blood spot on the ceiling felt so. That whole scene actually, where Angel comes into the doorway and she's standing. It felt so modern, like I could see it in a modern film or something like that. I just thought it was amazing, and the ending fit with Tess's character because she was always willing to just die. It seemed so, but she died happy. So that's
because she got her. Well, okay, so why was it just a moment of insanity? Was it her final proof of her love? She describes it that way.
Well, she seems to take a lot of pride in like traditional promises and stuff like that, and she was really pissed when he came back, and she was really upset that that he lied to her and said he would never come back, and then he taunted.
Alec lied to her and said that Angel would never come back. Yeah,
exactly. Alec lied to her and said Angel would never come back. Exactly. And just seeing him, and I just think all of that, it was just, I don't think it was insanity. And it's what I said earlier. I was hoping that Angel would kill Alec, but he kind of did.
I remember you saying that, and I knew how it ended, so I really had to keep my mouth shut.
I remember you said that. For the same reason. I was like, I have questions about the end. I am wondering about the same thing about, like, was it a moment of insanity? Was it like the right thing for her to do? And like that, I think it goes back to the question of moral responsibility that you brought up last week. And also, this is not as essential. It's just a question that I have about her request that he marry Liza Lou. I don't get that. I don't understand that. So I would like to, but it's also not.
Yeah, I've got that on my list too. So one thing I read, Shoshana, are you familiar with the story of allegedly what inspired this novel, his witnessing of an execution?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's also kind of a trope of a woman who is ill appointing her successor. I mean, that you've probably seen that, it's in melodramas. There's a novel called Daniel Walgrave that's about it. There's No Sad Songs for Me is a movie. It doesn't exactly make sense to me, but it's almost as if.
But is it supposed to be just a gesture of love for him again, that she loves him so much she wants him to be happy when she's gone?
Right, and also that that she would be remembered well.
Because Liza Lou is like her.
Yeah.
Yes.
And,
okay.
And it's not as if he has to see Liza Lou as the not good enough, although of course she's not good enough because she's not Tess.
Yeah.
But not that it's an offense. I guess Better Liza, it was interesting because we had a rehearsal for it with the is scene earlier, because is also something like Tess, and there, she was honest and said that Tess loved him more. I'm looking at the murder scene though, and the way that she explains it to Angel, right? How do you mean you have killed him? I mean that I have.
Yeah.
All right, cross-examination. What, bodily?
Mhm.
You know, is he dead? Yes, he heard me crying about you, and he bitterly taunted me and called you by a foul name, and then I did it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, so it's not
Well, and
just that she's erasing him, but that she doesn't want to think, she doesn't want to think something negative about
Mm.
the man she loves.
And we did see, I mean, she did slap him and draw blood previous to this.
Oh, and then she says that like, ever since that, I was afraid that I would kill him or something along those lines. I don't know the exact words.
Yeah, he nagged me about you before, and then I dressed myself and came away to find you. That's very Tess, you know, just sort of explaining what happened, and then she takes the next step.
Perfectly honestly.
But she also says, I was sure that this is what would bring you back to me. Where is it?
Oh, that's right.
Oh,
Yeah.
but I don't blame you. Only Angel, will you forgive me my sin against you? Now I have killed him. I thought as I ran along that you would be sure to forgive me. Now I have done that.
Like,
It
because
came to
she
me as a
killed him.
shining light that I should get you back that way.
In my book, it says it came to me as an enlightenment.
An enlightenment.
That I should get you back that way.
That she's going to get him back by killing Alec.
Because he said earlier that it would be different if this guy weren't still alive. The fact that he's still alive is what keeps us apart. So I think that's been playing in her head all this time.
Because she does take everything he says as absolute truth. So that would make sense.
And so then she sees the knife. She sees him taunting Alec or Angel. She is, I don't think she's even angry. I think it's just an automatic response. Like, the knife is here, there it goes into his body. And I don't think it was like an act of passion. I think it was simply
this is what logically follows.
Well, so
it's like fate is dragging the horse into the mail wagon. It's just this is what's going to happen. So to me, it was just automated thing.
Let me just mention as context this story that apparently inspired the idea for Tess and him. And it was a story of someone named Elizabeth Martha Brown, who was abused by her husband, driven to retaliation, and hit him in the head with an axe. But then she insisted that the wound was caused by a horse kicking him, which was a lie. And she was sentenced to hanging. But had she confessed, I think maybe she wouldn't have been hanged, and then she finally did confess in the end. But anyway, he witnessed her hanging, and apparently she was very beautiful. And he was struck by the image of this beautiful woman whose abuse was not relevant to her punishment. The abuse she had suffered for so long was not relevant to the punishment that was imposed on her. So if that's true, that had anything to do with inspiring the story, it's almost like the murder comes first in his mind, and then he works backward from there. But it did emphasize, I think, or clarify the reason that we don't feel much judgment in that moment, because what we're supposed to feel is everything that had led up to the moment that would drive this completely innocent woman who would never have hurt a fly to such an act, a horrific act of violence. So I thought that was interesting, an interesting story.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, it is interesting, but see how different it is.
Yes.
Because she's going to murder him. She could have murdered him after the rape.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Or if she's into murdering, she could have been furious at Angel with the double standard, just saying, you know, and been outraged by that. And here, it's true that he's you know, he's horrible, but he's horrible not just because of what he does, but because of what he says. And that's a kind of abuse that probably wouldn't be persuasive as, oh, he said that to you, and therefore you picked up the knife.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been thinking about your comments last time, and there is, I think, I accept Thomas Hardy's perspective, but at the same time, it's very hard to relate to his perspective. So those are the two things I have to sort of shift back and forth between. So he's presenting this character whose purity and innocence makes her completely passive, makes her passive in a way up until the end. She's always taking the blame upon herself. She's always forgiving everyone else. She's always finding excuses for other people's behaviors. She won't judge, she won't criticize, but this it seems essential to who she is as a character and why he regards her as so pure and perfect. Now, the weird thing is that it seems to me like he's able to successfully create that character. And I don't know, you know, I never thought of this before, but I almost wonder whether Angel's proposal to isn't preparation for this event too. It's like, in a moment, you'll do something completely against your moral principles, and then, you know, because we can all see the circumstances that conspire to drive you to that. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but it feels consistent to me that she is this passive, pure, innocent character, and yet commits this murder in the end. That didn't feel so jarring and out of place to me. But at the same time, if I'm taking the perspective, not Hardy's perspective, but my own, that character is hard to accept as a real, I mean, as something that makes sense to me to be so, I don't know, I guess it must be how he regards women, that kind of meekness and absolute devotion under all circumstances, no matter how the other person treats. I mean, if the love is, Alec deserved to be murdered, but Angel, because the love was real, the devotion is absolute, even in the face of his injustices to her. So that kind of devotedness and meekness and generosity and charity, those just seem all to be essential characteristics of hers that he's then making us say, this to have a woman embody all of these perfect characteristics and beauty, this is the situation that society puts her in when that's the case, and drives her to this kind of act at the end.
Yeah, I think that's that's what Hardy's getting at the whole time. So if we look at it from his perspective, that's the point. And I think, you know, given the time and his, you know, his context, I think he does a good job, but, you know, definitely coming at it from our own perspective, it's going to be different. And that's kind of what I was getting at last week when I was talking about the role that fate plays in the novel. I was wondering, and, you know, I don't know how true this is, but it's an idea that has occurred to me, that he kind of has this style where he talks about, like, you know, all of fate's circumstances kind of cornering her into, you know, this is, I can't imagine the story ending any other way than her killing Alec and then dying. So, you know, the point of the story being this, you know, critique of how a pure woman is treated in society, the necessary result of being perfectly pure in this society in which he lives. I think that the role of fate really fits into that point very poetically, that it's not just the society that conspires against her, but it's seemingly like the universe, everything in the world. Now, I have read other works by Thomas Hardy, and I know that fate plays a role in those other works as well in a different way. But I do think that in this sense, at least, that fatalistic style really does add to the poetry of it. I think it makes a really good device. we'll see.
So one thing I read last night, and I forgot to cite where I read this, so I'm sorry, I'll look it up later. But I just copied and pasted a paragraph from something I saw that said, let's see, it was discussing two main interpretations of Tess at the time that it came out. And it says, one, that Tess was an indictment of the injustice of man's own moral and social laws. Okay, yeah, we've talked a lot about that. This interpretation was influenced by Hardy's subtitle, A Pure Woman. The other, that Tess was a treatise of indignation at the laws of the universe, which were inexorable and beyond man's control. Those who maintain this, okay, and so on and so on. It says the majority of critics since 1912 have tended to combine these two interpretations and have come to the conclusion that Tess was an expression of dissatisfaction at the injustice of the laws of both man and the universe.
No. And kind of what I'm saying is like that, but that the device of fate in this novel, I think, supports the main point of injustice of society.
But my question is, if it's the forces of fate, you can't be really judging society. If it's the forces of society, then fate doesn't really have anything to do with it. So I remember Sarah bringing this up a while back and me being inclined to think it's kind of an incoherent mixture. My own reaction is more towards it being, I think this is consistent with what you're saying. He's throwing the fatalistic aspects in there for poetry, but philosophically, they don't really harmonize.
Sure. I think you're right.
The D'Urberville coach and the blighted star and like all of these elements of, curses descended on the family or just the fate of the universe altogether. I think if I had to nail him down, I think his real point is about society. He saw what happens to a beautiful, innocent woman, that she's going to be targeted by men like Alec. And then she's going to be blamed for what happens to her. That there's this moral absolute we have of the fallen woman, the impure woman, and it's absurd. And he revisits this. It's kind of a simple principle when it comes down to it, and he revisits it many times. There was a great passage in this last reading where Tess finally articulates it herself. Sorry, let me find it really quickly. Oh gosh. If somebody can find it faster, it's when she says she didn't deserve the judgment that fell on her. Oh gosh, I'd have to go to my notes. I'll find it. But he revisits this several times, that you're not blameworthy for something that wasn't an action on your part. If it was done to you, you can't be blamed for it.
Right.
But that seems to be what he thinks is the lot of the beautiful, innocent woman. Something is going to be done to her, and then she's going to be blamed for it. Yeah. So that seems like the real focus to me, is to defend women against this fundamental injustice against them. But then, he throws a bunch of beautiful, poetic, fatalistic, more general statements, which probably reflect what his actual, as you said, that appears in his other work. So it probably reflects his more general philosophic perspective, but it's just not the focus in this one.
Of this particular novel. Yes, exactly. Thank you for putting that in a much more coherent way. So yes, the main point is about like society. This is what happens to a pure woman in this society. And then the fatalistic aspects of it, I think, they take a more stylistic role in this particular novel.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I did find the passage. It says, Tess remained where she was a long while till a sudden rebellious sense of injustice caused the region of her eyes to swell with the rush of hot tears thither. Her husband, Angel Clare himself, had, like others, dealt out hard measure to her. Surely he had. She had never before admitted such a thought, but he had surely. Never in her life, she could swear it from the bottom of her soul, had she ever intended to do wrong. Yet these hard judgments had come. Whatever her sins, they were not sins of intention, but of inadvertence. And why should she have been punished so persistently? So when we got to that, I kind of wrote theme and the question mark in that, but it's funny to think that that theme is relatively simple.
Yeah.
And the aspect of society, that moral principle embedded in society that he's attacking, but he weaves it into a very dramatic story.
Yes, and I have to look something up because I want to make sure I get it right.
Okay.
Go on.
I think I just wanted to make a point in support of what you're saying, Lisa, is the theme that we talked about between society and nature. And I see nature as being more similar to like this universe or fate, to this determinism. So because he also contradicts that with his positive writings of nature and juxtaposing nature against society, I think that supports what you're saying.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, there was that. I loved the line. Oh gosh, that we haven't even had time just to dwell on the scenes in these last chapters, but the scene of them in the mansion, and when she peeks through the keyhole and they're lying there so peacefully in bed together with her lips parted and against his cheek. I mean, it's just so, I don't know what word to use. Haunting is the word I want to use, but that scene was beautiful, but I guess it's haunting at the same time. But anyway, there was a line there that it said, inside was forgiveness. Like all you heard outside was the birds and nature, and inside was forgiveness. But beyond this scene was judgment. And that again seemed like another one of those moments where they're outside of society just for this moment, and outside of society things can be just, which reminds me we have to talk about that last line about justice. But outside of society you can have justice and forgiveness and goodness, but then in society it's just condemnation for innocence.
Right. And that's kind of what I was trying to look up. Like somebody said, was it Aristotle? I don't remember. Said that the purpose of tragedy is to hold up a mirror to society and be like, stop. And I think that this does that perfectly well. It's that to a T. And then it does that with incredible poetry as well.
Yeah, I want to say something about that, but Stefan, you go first.
Did you ever see the 1960s movie for El Cid?
No.
Okay. Because I don't know what's in the play and what's in the movie, because I think the movie's a little longer than the play. Okay. But there's a scene after when El Cid and his lover, they actually fall in love and they go, like, he's excommunicated. Is that in the play where he's excommunicated for?
I think the play is not the same story as El Cid. Okay. It's connected, but not the same story.
There's a scene there that reminded me of them living in that mansion. So anyways, my question was, do you think that Thomas Hardy thinks that this is a woman's nature, or this is the result of a woman living in this society where she becomes self-sacrificial in this way?
I think he thinks it's the ideal.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay. Anyone else?
Well, no, I think what's so powerful is that she actually gets to have something of her happy ending by killing someone. And Hardy can't possibly think that this is universalizable.
No.
I mean, that's why I think it's so interesting and yet very believable. Yeah. That she does this, she doesn't hesitate. Well, she explains it and so on, and she's got her reasons, but she doesn't say afterwards, I didn't know what I was doing or anything like that. It's, that she's done this. She's taken herself out of the social narrative, and she and Angel are making the days until she gets caught worth living.
Yeah. Well, Angel, I mean, he does allow for a little promise of society, because Angel does forgive her.
Yes.
I liked the transition where he goes to her mother to find out where she is, And he says, do you know where she is? And she says, no, but you should. You ought to know how she's doing. And he says, I forget how he responds exactly, but it's like, he says, that's right. That's true.
I should know. You're right.
I admit that. Right. I admit it. That's right. So that was suddenly we're seeing him completely on the other side of that transition where he admits his own fault to her.
Mhm.
Then there's the sequence of him just being an idiot time after time again. Oh, she must be a servant in this household. Oh, the mother is so well taken care of. That's nice. Oh, she goes by the name D'Urberville, but she still says she's married.
I'm glad she can pass for a married woman. Yeah.
So that was a little hard to take. Although it did increase the suspense for me as a reader. One thing I wanted to ask everyone is, when did you know she had run away with Alec, or that she had succumbed to Alec? At what point did you decide, oh boy, oh my gosh, that's what happened?
As soon for me, it was when the lady in the house said or the person that he asked said there's a Mr. and Mrs. D'Urberville.
Okay.
Over there. I was like, yep, there it is. What's that?
I didn't know till she told us.
No, she told
and
us.
I had read it before and forgotten.
Oh, wow. So I read it before. I can't remember the first time, because this time it seemed, but I'd read it before. It seemed obvious when the mother wrote the letter saying, my daughter's away from us right now. I think because Alec had been so persistent up until that moment and had used the arguments of the welfare of her family. And then that, again, another amazing scene we haven't even begun to talk about, the driven on a rainy day out of their home. They arrive and the place is let, and then they're sleeping in the rain in a graveyard. I mean, if he wants to show someone driven to absolute desperation, I think he succeeded at that.
Sure. This time, I don't know why it didn't strike me as hard the first time I read it, but the sleeping in the graveyard, I was like, are you serious?
Her young siblings.
And once again, this is a perfect example of Hardy doing something in these novels that is so dramatic. If anybody else wrote it, it would have been so over the top, like the killing of the pheasant, the scene where he puts her in the coffin. If I read those scenes written by anybody else, I would have been like, come on.
Yeah.
But something about the way that he makes that happen, I'm like, like it hurts my soul.
Mm-hmm. But so let me quickly
not be able to get a rental. Do you think Alec went on ahead to the next town and made it so that because he doesn't take their plight seriously. That's why he's on gravestone making fun of the dead ancestors.
Right.
He doesn't have any understanding of what that would mean. That these are her people that
no, it's completely exploitative.
They haven't, and she's desperate, and their whole family is desperate, and he's making fun of it. I think there's a little hint that he may have, gone on ahead on his horse, and then, you're having troubles. I have a place. Like I said, you sure you didn't want it?
Yeah, because he's using her family's plate for his own purposes. It's completely clear. But anyway, I was talking about promise, and then we're talking about graveyards. The promise is that Angel accepts the blame. He defends her and stays by her side even after she commits murder. So yes, it's not universalized, being driven. Committing murder to protect yourself isn't universalizable, but he seems to show a way out of these situations. If Angel had defended her from the start, then she wouldn't have been in this position. And if society changes to not judge a woman for having been abused by a man like Alec, then things will improve.
Well, I think there's also still this passivity. I mean, they're going to sleep under the stars. They're going to wander. What would you do?
Right.
You'd be looking for a boat to get to some other place.
Right.
Go back to Brazil.
No,
Yeah.
but doesn't he think women are helpless? Doesn't he think women? I mean, I know she kills someone, but that just seems like a mad fit of desperation because of what she's been driven to. But he does seem to me to think that women are entirely dependent on men's laws, men's
Right.
morality,
Yeah. And it's
men's
sorry, go ahead.
protection.
Oh,
And there's
and-
also the bit that he's not for sure that she killed him at first. Like he
Mhm.
thinks that she made like an attempt and then left. Like it's like there's no way that Tess could have killed somebody. And so I'm sure to a certain degree he's just kidding himself. But there's also like he doesn't know the degree to which they should be running for their lives.
Mm. But he does eventually.
Eventually, yeah. But before that, that's when they're kind of like wandering through the forest. And he's like, we'll go that way.
Yeah. But he does still, I mean, even when he knows for sure that this is what's happened, he's still 100% on her side.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm more referring to
That first moment.
well, no, I'm referring to what Shoshana was talking about with
Okay.
the kind of wandering, like if
Mm.
you knew that you were harboring a fugitive, you'd get in a boat, but he doesn't quite
Mm.
know at first. So he's kind of wandering at first. And then,
Mm.
but I think to his credit, when he does find out that it was in fact true and that she wasn't lying, he does stick with her.
Stefan.
I was wondering if you thought there was a plot device so Thomas Hardy strips Angel of his good looks, right? He's not handsome anymore. And I just wonder if you think there's something like to prove there that there's some deeper, affection besides just appearance. If he did that for a certain purpose, it seems like it.
I mean, there is the line in that moment when it describes him, how he looks when she sees him again, and that she doesn't even notice. He at first thinks she might be put off by his appearance, and as it turns out, it doesn't even enter into her consciousness. He is Angel. So I do think, I mean, it certainly shows, maybe there's more to it, but it just shows the purity of her devotion to him. It's a devotion to him, not anything external to or superficial to him.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking, because like he could have just been normally how he looked before and come back from Brazil and just be the same guy. Like she was just as pretty, so
Prettier.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was I just going to ask? Oh, there was another scene that I wanted to talk about. One of the questions that I had was why the D'Urberville coach legend, but I think I feel satisfied with what we've said about that it is a bit extraneous to the actual plot.
Sure. Yeah. I don't think it's an essential, but I do think it's just another one of those like omens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. One thing I wanted to say here is that because I have not and never will try to write fiction, there seems to me, even though I read so much and analyze literature and love literature, there's something about the dramatic unfolding of things that is an art that I have no means of identifying in principle. That's what I don't know if there's something I should read to have a better handle on what makes for effective unrolling of drama, sheer drama, forget the thematic elements. Because I mean, the way Stefan described his experience of these last chapters is how I felt like it was just racing out of control. I was gripped. I didn't want to put it down. I was completely captivated by it. And all of these scenes of them driven from their homes, sleeping in the graveyard, him wandering the streets looking for her, having her appear at the door, all of that felt like it was so brilliantly crafted in a way to make it memorably dramatic. But I don't have the means of identifying what it is that makes him so successful at that. So you were saying, Grace, that in anybody else's hands, these scenes wouldn't have worked the same way. And I definitely think that's true. And I wish I had a better capability of identifying why he's so good at that. Why, yeah. Because I remember at the beginning, those of you who just read it for the first time, me saying that I feel as if I've lived all these scenes and that I was there, and reading them again felt like going back to a place I've been. Now, I guess that's how we ought to feel with any great novel, but there are many that I enjoy, but I feel more like an observer. I enjoy it and I observe it and I recall what happened, but I don't recall it as if it were personal experience. And there's something about his style of writing that makes me experience it as if it were personal, as if I were there.
Yes, I wish I had the words for that too, because you're totally, I have the same thing. And I'm equally not up to the task of describing why.
I mean, it must be something about, I mean, part of it is just his ability to evoke memorable visual descriptions of the environments that he creates. But again, there are many people who try to describe environments and it just becomes boring tedium that you kind of want to skip through.
Right.
Whereas with his descriptions, I devour it and feel immediately transported into the world he's created. So part of it, I think, must be an excellent selectivity of details too.
Right. I think he has, I don't know if this is the best way to, probably not the best way to put it. It's okay. Say it anyway. He really has an excellent grasp of the relationship between words, vocabulary, and emotions. He knows exactly which words to use, whether it's a description of a lake or the description of someone's face, to evoke an emotion from you, the reader.
Okay. Yeah, that goes back to something Shoshana said a while ago about him being a poet. That his ability as a poet enables him to create these descriptive scenes that evoke direct emotion from you. So you're not just reading them passively as description, and it's not just conjuring a visual image, it's conjuring a feeling in you.
Yes.
Oh, exactly. That was really, okay, wonderful. The synthesis of those helps me understand it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, because whenever there's a particularly poignant scene, I'm always reminded of neutral tones.
Yes.
The description of the smile, the deadest thing alive enough to have strength to die. And it's just like, he has a direct line to my soul. He can evoke emotions from me more than almost any other writer.
What would be really interesting to me is to find a writer that we admire who has descriptive visual scenes, but they don't have that impact. That there's something else that we're admiring about the writing and that it is admirable and good, but it doesn't have the same impact as Hardy.
Maybe we can try to do that in our
future readings. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to do that. That's an interesting challenge. And I think it'd be valuable in then trying to describe what it is about Hardy that is so
powerful.
Caleb. Sorry.
Oh, well, can we hear Caleb?
Well, I wasn't next, but
okay.
Who was?
I wasn't keeping track of order. I just saw that you appeared and had.
Tarsha. Go ahead, Tarsha.
I actually was going to say, I have a question about the novel as a whole, not specifically on the topic we're discussing now. So if yours is on topic, let's start with that, Caleb.
Okay, yes. So the coach, that struck me really hard because in the story, when the story was being given about the coach, it was a murder. It was definitely a murder. Then at the end of it, he says, I don't know if it was the person who was being abducted or the abductor.
Oh yeah.
And regardless of whether it was somebody defending their life or someone taking someone from where they were, it was still murder.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the end of it, like when she kills, it is just murder, even though like she's trying to escape from this horrible situation that she's in. And I don't know. So the coach scene story definitely meant a lot, even with this like throwaway word of, oh yeah, it was murder. I don't know who it was, this one or that one, but it definitely was like, could have been self-defense, or could have been just even more grotesque taking of a life. So I don't know. I thought that was very interesting.
Well, it was certainly
foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
did we just say the same thing at the same time?
Definitely foreshadowing, and that description of it is from Alec's perspective, who's incapable really of seeing the difference between those two things. He doesn't have enough moral sense to care.
Right.
Well, it's not written down somewhere for him to refer to. So
right.
Well, I think it's also, but I think it also is, yes, it's Alec's perspective, but I think we also see in the end that it's society's perspective too. And it just shows like what women mean.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And you bringing this up makes me want to understand, like, was there a difference between like killing someone in self-defense and just killing someone back then? I don't know.
Okay, but here's another really powerful thing about that. The entire novel has surrounded moral judgment of a woman for having been raped. And then in the end, that woman commits murder and we don't feel judgmental of her. Now, if he wanted to show there's something perverse about society's moral code, that's a pretty powerful way to do it. If he can tell a story so that we're seeing society condemn her throughout this entire novel and seeing her suffer absolute misery and destruction because of society's false condemnation of her, and then have us not feel judgmental for something that is so categorically evil. That's a pretty powerful commentary on society.
It sure is.
Tarsha.
Okay, so first, I guess I want to say thank you for this discussion series throughout the novel and for the ability to go so in depth with it, because I got a lot out of it.
Good.
I did watch a short video by someone else analyzing the novel, and I was like, what?
I want to know, what was it?
There were two things that she brought up. It was like a university professor, I can't remember, some university in England, made like a 10-minute video that I found on YouTube about Tess. One theme that she mentioned was about what are we to make of the fact that although initially Tess was taken advantage of, she seems to continue her relationship with Alec afterwards. I didn't get that impression at all from reading it or from discussing it in these groups, but she kind of was implying that the first time when Tess was at the poultry farm, that she continued to have some kind of relationship with Alec, and then that she ends up in the end accepting, this position as posing as his wife. So I just wanted to get the group's thoughts on that. And then the other thing she brought up was the theme of the color red, which I don't think we had picked up on, but when you mentioned the face slap that drew blood, and then of course the impaling of the horse, and then the ace of spades, was that the shape of the, or
the ace of hearts,
ceiling.
on the ceiling.
Yeah, on the ceiling. So there was, I can see that maybe there was something there, but it didn't seem, I feel like there were so many other things we discussed that felt more important. So I'm curious.
Yeah.
Someone else is picking up on something that we didn't.
I would love the opportunity to express my extreme distaste with taking this themes approach to literature. Yes, you can do that. Yes, it can be a fun, superficially satisfying intellectual exercise. You could pick anything. Cows. All right. Now we're going to analyze the whole book in terms of cows. I could draw some thread throughout the novel and show how things shift according to cows. We could have a fun game where we just pick the most arbitrary of categories, and it can be done, and there's a certain kind of satisfaction from it, but it's one that I think is ultimately at odds with the real satisfaction that comes from reading literature. So I don't like picking up themes of red or anything equivalent to that in a novel. I don't think that's ultimately helpful. I think it
felt non-essential.
Epistemologically destructive. So that said, I do think she carried on a relationship with Alec, didn't she? Immediately after the rape. It said it took her a while. I think it said it took her a little while to figure out. I don't know if it's carried on a relationship. She stayed.
I think I got the impression that she succumbed, like that he was her abuser and she was just making the abuse for a little while because she didn't really have a choice.
She didn't know what to do. Right. But I think there was just a short period of time where she didn't leave immediately.
I don't have a sense for how long it took her to leave. I was trying to remember, and I don't know if it's indicated exactly how long.
But in any case, describing that as carrying on a relationship with him doesn't sound like the right way to describe it.
Right. I disagree with those words. He certainly, like, she does remain. I don't know if it was for a week or a month. But either way, like, the next thing we see her doing is leaving. Like, I think the essential of that is that she does leave as soon as she realizes or as soon as she can, after she realizes what he meant by his, I don't know what you would call it, by his stuff that he did. And then every time that he shows up later, she tries to get him to leave, and he just doesn't stop until he finally gets her to break down using her biggest weakness, which is her family. So I don't think it's fair to describe her as carrying on a relationship with him. I might describe it as he, like, forces a relationship on her, because he's certainly still around, it's just against her will.
Yeah.
That's how I interpreted it too. And John said something in the chat that I think makes sense too. Alec perpetuates the relationship. She always asks him to leave her alone and to go away. And initially it was weeks. That sounds about right.
And I'm sorry for this silly comment, but I was thinking that he hunts her, he stalks her, he hunts her into a corner, but this time the rabbit fights back. Okay, Stefan.
Shoshana mentioned this like early on in the book, because the rape scene did elude me the first time, like until I saw the chapter title next, and I had to reread it. And she brought up about sleep and how I think she said some kids would know in a different culture that you shouldn't sleep. But it's funny because it seems to come up. She sleeps in Stonehenge. Oh. Everyone comes back. Alec is sleeping. He gets stabbed. Well, he wasn't sleeping. That's right. He was taunting her. But it still seems like don't sleep, according to Thomas Hardy.
Constant vigilance, according to Thomas Hardy.
Can we talk about Stonehenge for a minute? First of all,
I wanted to talk about that because I don't know that I fully understand that, and I'd really like to hear.
Is it her pagan church? I mean, is it? That's what it felt. It felt
like she was a sacrifice to the sun or something.
Not exactly. It just felt like, I don't know, her place of rest. But that would not be found within the church for her. So instead it's the pagan monument.
Oh, I see what you're getting at. I like that. I was more
Is that right though?
I don't know. I think that it could be. I wish I could just ask Thomas Hardy.
Yeah. But it transforms Stonehenge for me. If I visit it, I will see Tess asleep
on the stone. Oh
on the stone.
I've never been to Europe, and I was never interested in Stonehenge. But then I read this and I was like, I have to go there.
Well, I think it's also how she's thinking in a way emotionally and privately rather than what would make sense. I mean, everybody knows where Stonehenge is. And so, and she says, is this a good place to hide? Okay, I mean, what, you go to Washington DC and you go to the Washington Monument, you think
Hide
this is
on
a
the
good place to
monument.
hide? Yeah, you know.
In an
it's,
open
On the top.
field,
On the
an
rotunda.
open field where it's the only structure.
Yeah, but it's as if there it is, you know, what monstrous place is this? And it's part of the end of this dream period in which they've been running away, but they can't really run away. They're not trying to run away in any
No.
Meaningful way.
reasonable, right?
No. Yeah.
And yeah, I'm really glad I reread this because it's been a few years, and I think that you're right in saying that it doesn't make sense to look for motifs, but
Mhm.
one could do worse than look for all the pure references, because
Sure.
that's thematic.
Yeah.
And it's something that she says, what she thinks, that when she sees Angel again, was it not the face of the one man on earth who had loved her purely and who had believed in her as pure? Now
Mhm.
that's very interesting, because for one thing, that's a contrast with Alec, because he never thought of her as pure.
Mm-mm.
And that was not something that appealed to him about her. In a sense, you know, she was a conquest, but
Mhm.
not particularly because she was pure. He didn't even
That's
think
'cause she
about
was
that.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. And the idea that Alec never did, well, of course, it's not as if those are the only two men in the world, but it's one more thing that separates them from each other. And then she says that Angel had believed in her as pure.
Mhm.
So it's as if she's trying to go back to the time before she told him.
Mm.
Oh, sure. Because he had believed in her as pure then. I think he might believe in her as pure again
Now,
Yeah. Yeah.
after his friend
Mm-hmm.
told
Mhm.
him to straighten up.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and what about the sweet letter from from Marion and Iz,
I loved that. Look to your wife.
and where
Yes.
they say continual dropping will wear away a stone, I more a diamond.
Oh gosh.
Continue that. If I continual dropping would have been my title for that
Oh,
chapter.
that's good.
Because again, that prepares us for the ending, for her finally succumbing to Alec,
Mhm.
because it's this continual dropping. He's so persistent and exploitative and present again and again and again and again until she just thinks there's nothing left for her.
And then the
Oh, there
dwarf-
was that awful line where it said she thinks she starts to conclude that he's more of a husband to her. Yet a consciousness that in a physical sense, this man alone was her husband seemed to weigh on her more and more.
Mhm.
Ugh.
That
Yeah.
monster.
Mhm.
Yeah, terrible. My God. So the Stonehenge thing, I thought that was a couple things were interesting about it. So, you know, there's a lot of choices that were made in. So yes, we do see her kind of laying down on the stone as a sort of sacrifice, the pure being sacrificed, and then like, well, Stefan put it in the chat, but it's like they didn't execute her there. They took her into society, but then Hardy one gives her the space to wake up from sleep, right? And I felt like that was very kind in a literary sense, like because you know all of these are choices that he's making, and then we don't follow her into the city. We stay in Stonehenge and then observe her dying in this way that's still beautiful. It's out in nature.
Yeah.
It's away from society that we see her killed by society. That is a huge choice that he made. I don't know. What were your thoughts on that? Like,
yeah, well, so a few lines from that section. It says, "It is Stonehenge," said Claire. "The heathen temple, you mean?" And then it says, "Yes, older than the centuries." But Tess, really tired by this time, flung herself upon an oblong slab that lay close at hand and was sheltered from the wind by a pillar. And then it says that because of the sun, the stone was warm and dry, in comforting contrast to the rough and chill grass around. And then she says, "One of my mother's people was a shepherd hereabouts." He used to say at Talbothays that I was a heathen, so now I'm at home. Sleepy are you, dear? I think you're lying on an altar. I like very much to be here, she murmured. It is so solemn and lonely after my great happiness with nothing but the sky above my face. So I really did think of this as a place of peace and rest.
Yeah.
And the sun, I didn't think of her as being sacrificed to the sun, but as being warmed by
Right.
the
Yeah.
sun. And this is her altar. And this is, she's not going to find her place in the church. That's where Alec pops out of gravestone. But here's her temple, and here's where she can have her moment of peace. And even the people who come to arrest her allow her a few moments of sleep. So I don't know. I sort of feel like I like thinking of it as this is always a deliberate choice on the author's part. So we need to be conscious of why he's choosing this. And I just feel like he, I don't know, regarded this as the place for us to show her at rest and in peace. And that's how he thought of that scene. So I have positive associations with that scene as her place of rest and happiness.
Same. Yeah. I think that it is, like you were saying, Caleb, it is a moment where it is kind. Like it's a friendly environment for her. And not to mention, like, just envisioning the pillars of stone. It's also like a really dramatic ending point too. To imagine that all occurring in Stonehenge is like,
well, I kind of even just like the idea of him claiming Stonehenge for his own purposes. Oh, Stonehenge, I'm going to make that mine. And now when Lisa and Grace go to see Stonehenge, it won't be anything about its original construction.
It'll be about Tess.
They're going to see Tess.
No, I'm sure we all had that same idea of like, okay, well, now I kind of want to go to Stonehenge.
Yeah.
Maybe lay down on this warm
stone. This is where Tess lies.
Yeah. That would be a fun thing to think about too. Other things where the author has claimed it as theirs, and now all we associate with it is their creation.
Yes, I love that.
Let me check my list of other general questions. Oh, so that last line, well, not last line, but very close to it. Justice was done, and the president of the justice in quotes was done, and the president of the immortals and the Aeschylean, how would you say that Aeschylean phrase, had ended his sport with Tess. So interesting. That's combining the fatalistic aspect with society's unjust laws too. Also, I told Grace, I looked up, okay, so there was the reference to
the two
Angel and Liza Lou with their heads bowed, and he compared it to some painting, which I looked up and didn't make any sense to me. And then there was a footnote in my version that said he actually referred to the wrong painting. Am I able to put pictures in the chat? Can you see that?
It says shared. You have to download it and then open it.
Oh, okay. Well, that's the painting supposedly that he was actually imagining, if you're able to see it. Or maybe Joseph, if you're the host, you could share it if you download it. But apparently it is at the National Gallery. So had I known, I could have seen it 2 weeks ago. There we go. So that's what came to mind when he pictured Liza Lou and Caleb and Angel. Caleb, I just misused your name for Angel.
Wait, so this is the wrong one, or this is
the correct one?
Okay.
The correct one.
Molly and Steve.
Yeah, going back to the coach, the haunted coach. I noticed a parallel between page 41 and page 445. There's a scene, page 41, really early in the book, where they are in the wagon and Tess is getting drowsy, and the mute procession past her shoulders of trees and hedges became attached to fantastic scenes outside reality, and the occasional heave of the wind became the sigh of some immense sad soul, conterminous with the universe in space and with history in time. And then in page 445, or right before that, there's a low note of moaning, bottom of page 444, as if it came from a soul bound to some Ixionian wheel. Oh, oh, oh. Then a silence, then a heavy sigh, and again, oh, oh, oh. This is after she kills Alec. So there's this moaning voice on the wind, like the ghost of the Tess in page 445, that happens in this early scene when she's falling asleep and the horse is about to be killed. So there's the two murders. She considers herself the murderer of the horse and the murder of Alec. And the ghostly sound. So I hadn't noticed that the first time through, but reading it at the end there, I remembered that. What is that reminding of? That horse ride, and so there was that parallel. I thought it was a nice bookend.
Yeah. I wanted to mention also, in terms of promise, Angel's parents. Now, we never do get to see them actually receive Tess, but there was the line that said, see if I can find it quickly.
Excited by her sin?
Yes. Do you have that handy?
No, I don't have the exact line, but I definitely know what you're talking about.
Right. That
I reacted to that very
their care was instantly excited by her sin.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
What were your thoughts about that?
Well, I think, like, he first says, don't concern yourself with this child of the soil, right? And I think that all this promise about how welcoming and kind he would have been if she only, put herself in front of the father instead of the brothers. I think it's kind of demonstrated here that, yes, he is, more kind, but it really would not have changed things. Like, that's what it kind of says to me, like the way that he's talking about this, and the excitement about her sin is
that makes it false.
Well, it's also like, yes, it's exciting to them, but I think those people really just kind of they do get excited about that,
the opportunity,
if it's not them. Like, if it's not like directly connected to them, then they want to be able to help out and move things along and make things better. But if it's directly connected to them, I feel like there is a difference in action when people are in the wrong way, as it were. Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was this line made me feel more that they would not have been as kind as what it was presented as. Yeah, that was my thought.
Anybody else have thoughts about that? Because I wonder if I misread it.
Well, the line is the tenderness towards Tess, which her blood, her simplicity, even her poverty had not engendered, was instantly excited by her sin. So it's like their tenderness towards her is excited by her sin. And we know that Angel's father has a soft spot for sinners, that he really feels it's his duty, and he has a legitimate compassionate desire to help them, like with Alec. So I didn't see it as being disingenuous in any way. I saw it as being
But I guess
genuine, but it's
my question is,
little...
does I interpret it as Hardy regarding that as a virtue in them?
Yeah.
That their Christianity is such that they really do offer forgiveness. It's not just about judgment. And that's the theme we've seen with them up to that point. So that's why I interpreted this that way.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, there's a certain type who takes self-satisfaction from forgiving sinners. So that's one way that and also, but that's not how I interpreted it. But and then there's also the fact that the one other instance we saw of them, of the father forgiving a sinner, was Alec, and look what that got him. So I'm not sure if now that makes me question whether Hardy does regard that as a virtue in them or not. So on the one hand, they would have accepted Tess. On the other hand, they would have accepted Tess on the premise of a moral code that facilitates people like Alec committing their crimes.
I see where you're coming from. Maybe it's just my personality, but I'm more inclined to believe that it is like not like a based in self-satisfaction, but more of a genuine tenderness.
That's how I saw it too. That's why I described it as promise, because I think he's telling us again, there are people within society who have the capacity to they have that connection to human nature and conscience and goodness that would enable them to transcend these very, I like to think of it as the fence painted religion versus earnest Christian forgiveness or
no, I like that distinction. And I there is certainly for me at least, I'm a little unclear on the perception of Angel's parents, because both of the, like Alec and the sign painter they both directly cite Mr. Clare as their inspiration. So that I think is a little bit, I don't know, it clouds things a little, but I do see him as being
here, I'll lend one more piece of evidence to their goodness, because we cannot close this book without talking about the quote about his mother.
Oh yes, I love
what
it.
woman indeed, among the most faithful adherents of the truth, believes the promises and threats of the word in the sense in which she believes in her own children, or would not throw her theology to the wind if weighed against their happiness? Well, what woman? We do have some examples of such women in this. But in any case, it is saying of her that the word only goes so far. And if it comes to the word against the welfare of her children come first. So that again seems to be that connection to basic goodness, as opposed, that whereas the brothers, it's the word all the way down. For the parents, there's something better beneath it. And just, it's a beautiful quote about motherhood in general. So let's see, any other, I guess since we only have a few minutes left, I want to make sure I ask, yes.
Sorry, this is not related. My laptop is about to die. I'm going to switch over to my
Oh, okay.
Be right back.
Okay. Well, my question, which the rest of you can think about while we wait for Grace to come back, is, are you glad you've read this novel? Was it a good experience for you overall? If so, what would be the major takeaways of the experience for you. So Grace and I were at a baby shower yesterday, and we were talking about this briefly. And one of the things I said is that, so I'm going to keep going back to Shoshana calling him a great soul, but there's something about the depth of his perspective on the human condition that it almost doesn't matter what his conclusions are about it. Experiencing the world through his eyes and with his poetry allows me to expand my own depth of perception and apply it in my own philosophic way. So I kind of surrender myself to the author as I'm reading, but what I come away with feels more structural than it does any sort of any particular conclusions. It's not that I come away sharing his outlook on the world. It's that I feel like I come away with a kind of, I don't know why, like a scaffolding or infrastructure or some expanded ability to think about the world that way. That's what I feel like I leave with. So that's one of the things that I love about him so much, and all of the authors that I love. Any other? Caleb, is your hand up to comment on that?
It is, yes.
Okay.
I definitely understand that scaffolding sort of thing. I actually have, in reading this, I've been thinking about religion as the basis for morality, and its removal from society. And like I think that, well, my complete thought is this: about there were things that people did a long time ago with religious purpose, and then we understand in retrospect that there's not really a religious purpose to do those things, but it served a practical purpose for separating a sick individual from the rest of society, or various things like that. It happens over and over. It's just like religion is put on top of it. But so I wonder, like, with the removal of religion, are there things that we are doing now that we're missing by just removing religion from our lives? And I personally don't believe in God and all of that, but I do wonder what sort of things we've lost just not going to church and being committed in this way. It's like but in reading this and thinking about that the whole time, I don't know that I got to any conclusions from this novel. I feel like there's probably another few books that I could read that kind of explore that thoroughly. He just touches on it and like makes you question like a lot.
Sure.
But no conclusions. Like the thing that he was supposed to say, oh, this is why, is like not there. Which is
so I often have people, especially people who are big fans of Ayn Rand, reluctant to read anything that's philosophically at odds, that they find is at odds with their own philosophic conclusions. And there's many reasons that that's problematic, but one of them is the one you're raising now, is that there are certain questions that have to come up in your mind. Forget the answers. You need the questions. And I think of that as the Alan Bloom theme. I don't know if you've ever read Closing of the American Mind, but we read it as a staff. Some of us read it in a book group, and it was absolutely transformative of my perspective on things. And that's one of the themes that he emphasizes, is that the reason, I think he particularly stresses the Greeks, but there's a lot more to it than that. But the reason we need a rich liberal education is that we need to even be aware of what are the questions we ought to be considering. So I would take real satisfaction and delight in the fact that the book raises a question, and maybe gives you a little insight into a potential answer, but not an answer, but it's a victory to have a question.
Ask the question. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
And that the more I read, the more questions I have. Now, I'm not taking the position that, to be wise is to realize you don't have the answer. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is wisdom to even start on the road to being wise. We need to know what questions we have to consider. And the more we read of great, brilliant, insightful authors, they're raising the questions for us, and they might answer them in a way we don't relate to, but we've benefited profoundly by having, and the questions are not even just the big questions like the one you mentioned. They're every nuance of insight into individual characters is another category of those. So yeah, that's
yeah, my other intention in this was definitely going to ask you about like other authors and that might explore that question more. So you gave me Alan Bloom, and if
oh, I would definitely read The Closing of the American Mind. That's, it's not reading a novel on it, but he describes a lot of society kind of traditions being overturned with good reason, but that you're left with somewhat of a cultural vacuum or a void in its place. And I just found that a helpful perspective to take in terms of
love it,
what I'm seeking from life. Let's see, Stefan, you want to say something?
Yeah, I actually want to piggyback off of what Caleb just said. I've been an atheist since, I don't know, like 16 years old. I'm 30 now. And before I read Ayn Rand, I would get so angry when I would see any mention of God in anything, because I guess I just didn't know, now after reading Rand, I understand what it is, why it is that they're believing in God. And it's the same way with a bad philosophical premise. I understand the bad philosophical premise, and I can know, because now I have the answers. When you don't have answers, especially when you're young, you're angry at the things that you're against, but you might not know why. And now it's like, oh, I have a philosophical understanding of the world, and now I can view these things and actually just be able to put those things aside and be able to experience the artwork and love the art. And like Leonard Peikoff has said this, the intellectual side of a novel is secondary. And so what I do want to say is the just the experience and be able to because you have to learn to read a novel that way. So Leonard taught me to read a novel that way and kind of extract that from artworks, and this was just an amazing experience. So thank you.
Well, that's kind of a full circle on this conversation, though you weren't privy to the start of it. Right before the group started, Joseph and I were talking about wanting to change the term classical to something else, because we didn't want to have, because there's a certain association with how to read books that comes with classics. It just brings this aura of like cultural duty that we just have to get through these things so that we're cultured people, and wanting to transform the idea of what the purpose of literature actually is, and figuring out what kind of language to use for that is challenging. But I'm glad that's been your experience, and that's what I hope to promote with everybody. But I wanted to reference something that Grace's husband, Kyle Steele, says to his students in history. When he was teaching history, he would always tell his students, he would discourage them from laughing at things in history or disparaging things in history that were foreign to them and seemed wrong, and he would always instead have them take the perspective that people did these things for reasons that they thought were right. There were reasons behind these things. And so take the perspective of try to understand the reasons rather than come at it from a perspective immediately of judgment from your current modern perspective. So I always love that he takes that angle with the kids. Before anyone goes, I want to say that Grace and I have loved this. You talked about not having church to go to. I have said repeatedly that this is my Sunday morning church. And it's a routine that I hope to keep up for a long time. So we've been talking about what books would possibly come next. And we have many, many, many that we'd like to do, but some are so long and formidable that we want to push them down the road a little bit, like Middlemarch and like Anna Karenina. So those are definitely on deck, but we're going to wait a while. And we thought we'd take on a few titles that are shorter, but very much at the top of our list in terms of things we personally want to do. So the three that are on our list right now are Ayn Rand's We the Living, which I think probably many of you have read, but as we have, but we have not read it recently, and we both have wanted to revisit it and go through it, the way we are with Tess and really immerse ourselves in it. And also, I had the great pleasure of seeing the refurbished version of the We the Living movie, which is they're working to re-release, and it's very beautiful. So that's something coming up in the near future. So that's one. Another is I just, on the recommendation of my daughters, picked up Madame Bovary for the first time since high school. And in my mind, this relates to what Stefan just said. It was a tedious, dreary obligation of something I had to force myself through. And I am absolutely devouring this novel. I'm captivated by it. So that would be one that would be interesting to do. And then the third is The Man Who Laughs. And it's a bit embarrassing for me to confess this, but The Man Who Laughs, which is Ayn Rand's favorite Hugo novel, is the one I have yet to tackle. I've read it. It was a long time ago, and I've started it again a couple of times and not finished. I'm one of those terrible people who starts a Hugo novel and doesn't finish it. So I know with certainty it's going to ultimately be one of the ones I want to be buried with, but I haven't gotten there yet. So maybe with a crew behind me and a deadline, that will finally happen. So I'm just putting those out there as possibilities right now, and maybe we'll send out a poll and see what interests people the most. But that's we can also take some suggestions if there's anything. Democracy. If there's anything, well, we don't want to just be talking to ourselves. We want you guys to stick around, so you get a vote. So I will follow up on that by email. I think we're planning to take next week off and then start again the following week. All right. Well, thank you for going on this journey with us. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was awesome. I have never really been a part of something like this, and it was just so cathartic to explore it in this way and just be able to talk to people. I don't know, like when I try to explore things and talk in depth about things, it's hard to find somebody that really cares.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah.
Well, that is what I love about this so much. Grace coined a term yesterday that I'm going to be using all the time now, where we're in Orange County, California, not exactly the mecca of cultural and sophistication. And she described what we're immersed in as SUV culture. So here in our SUV culture, now I have my little oasis at VanDamme Academy, which is absolutely amazing. And I always have people, I often say the conversations that happen in our office could not happen almost anywhere else in the world. But outside those walls, it can be hard to find. So it's been amazing to me to draw from wherever all of you are to this wonderful conversation every week.
Also, I think that you guys did a great job segmenting. Like, you've read this all before, and like it definitely felt like paced, and
Okay.
I didn't feel like there was a like, hey, you know, I don't know that yet. You know, like you guys did a great job. Like, I don't know how you did. I don't think that like I could do that very well on a
We'll
book.
pretend we don't know what's coming next.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Like,
we're teachers who teach
yeah.
the same literature year after year after year. So
That's
we
fair.
do have a
Okay.
little practice with that.
I see.
Shoshana.
Sure. I just wanted to comment that I think one of the strengths of the way that you've done this and the group is that people are actually reading the text, and that the observations need to come from the direct encounter with the text. You would think that that goes without saying, but it often doesn't go without saying.
Sure.
And while I've
Right.
said it, I'll just mention that, you know, Alan Bloom makes a nasty crack about Ayn Rand.
Oh, no.
Well, it's in there. You can look at it in the index, but the thing is, I don't think he would have said that if he'd actually opened up
Read
one
it.
of the books.
Right,
Yeah.
right. No, I know the favorite books part is what you're talking about, right?
Well, it's where he
But-
says there's always some girl in my class who's read Ayn Rand. Yeah.
Right. No, I think that was in the part where he's talking about how
Yeah.
depressing it is that people don't have favorite books.
Well,
Yes,
I don't,
yes.
if he'd read it, I don't think he would have said
He's
that.
good at raising the questions. That's that's how I think of him.
And talking about books he knows.
And talking about books he knows, sure. So yes, very quickly, one of my favorite stories, there was a group of moms who at VanDamme Academy who formed a book club. And I remember one of my students, or maybe, I don't know if it was one of the parents or the student himself, who told me that he wandered into the room while they were having a conversation. And I picture him leaning against the wall, and he just looked at them and said, "But what is the theme? Come on, what is the theme?" He just found their conversation so disintegrated and fragmented and not related to what was actually important. So I just love that image of the student. So yeah, we get around to theme here. All right. Well, expect an email. Tell me your thoughts about what you'd like to read next, and I hope we will get to see you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.